Welcome to Webcertain TV. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Rand Fishkin from SparkToro, who's going to talk to us about what he thinks is happening on the web at the moment and what marketers should be really focusing on in 2019. So, hey Rand, thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. So, you've been talking a lot recently about some of the things you think, well, we know have been happening on the web, but that you think really are worth taking note of and are going to impact the way that we do search marketing and digital marketing. So what do you think these key issues are to start?
Yeah, I talked about a few of these here today at SMX. I think some of the big ones are the social networks and Google, kind of the main forces behind the web, doing more to keep traffic on their own websites rather than sending it out to other properties, making it much harder for brands in particular, but also publishers of all kinds to earn engagement on those platforms and traffic from them. They're essentially biasing to more one-to-one human communication, to more personal interactions over brand interactions. And I think in addition to those, there's also this growing trend around influencer marketing, which is having some adverse headwinds that it's running into recently, particularly with some of the legal issues that have come up in the UK and the US and the EU, as well as lots of folks realizing that, hey, wait a minute, not all of this engagement is real, not all of these followers are real, not all of this impact is real. And then finally, a lot of marketers who've turned to paid as being the solution to these problems, finding that there's not enough ROI in those paid channels because the dollars that are going into them and euros are essentially paying more than the price that you can earn a return on that investment because there's a lot of dollars seeking growth rather than profitability. So these forces are combining to create an environment that's just much, much more difficult to operate in than web marketers have faced in sort of the past decade and a half.
And that's definitely true when you're talking about paid, because I think that correlates to the first point, which is at one point, Facebook, you could put a post out there and you could expect to see some organic reach. Now there's no point, nobody even tries anymore. So the approach was you need to do paid. So that's what everyone's been doing. And obviously that has an effect that everybody's doing it and it's pushing up the price, and actually combined with the fact that these platforms are trying to do whatever they can to stop people leaving, you're basically going in a big circle and not getting very far.
Yeah, I think there's that frustration, and I think there's also this issue of marketers finding that they're spending dollars trying to do advertising in spaces where people don't already know them. And when that happens, the ROI is terrible. Because if you're interacting with a brand that you've already heard of, you're much more likely to make a transaction. But if someone is advertising to you, you've never heard of that brand before, with rare exception, a few of the kind of what I'll call temporal fashion brands on Instagram that sometimes have success with this. With rare exception, those transactions just don't happen. And so what you see is a bunch of dollars getting thrown at impressions and clicks that turn into nothing.
So where should we be looking now then as digital marketers? Because of course people still want to buy from brands, people still need things or want to do things. So it's not that the opportunity's gone away, we just have to find it differently. So how do we start with that?
I mean, I think that the reality is it is more challenging, but there's still opportunity for those who are intelligent about how they do their targeting, how they do their marketing. And part of that is realizing how these platforms operate and then playing to what they want. So in social, for example, a lot of engagement, a lot of interaction can still be had if you are playing to the network's preference for on-platform engagement, right? So rather than, hey, I'm trying to drive you to my site to make a purchase, it's, hey, I'm trying to drive activity on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever. And by earning that engagement, I can still get some brand reach and exposure, which I can then later capitalize on through, maybe the rare organic post that does drive some traffic, or some paid advertising that takes advantage of my algorithmic engagement and the fact that I have an audience that knows who I am and likes me already.
So it's really, don't be patient. You have to be a little bit patient. You have to invest some time in, especially if you're a new company, in building your brand awareness, in doing some content that is purely about that, is about building engagement without thinking we need to go straight in for the sale.
Yeah, so historically we had this like idea that you would do content marketing on your site, promote it on social networks and through search, and earn the traffic back to your site for that content. Yeah. And now you have to basically go, whoop, let me take this content that I'm doing and customize it for each different platform and put it on the platforms themselves where it can earn engagement. And then every 5 to 10 posts that I create that go out across these networks, I'm going to drag people back to my site for something else. Yeah. So it's like a bit of a mind shift and also a strategic. I think patience is the right word, right? You need to recognize that you will not be able to drive visits, conversions, sales, ROI directly and quickly on these platforms. You're going to have to build brand on them first and then drag that over slowly.
And from the Google side of things and the kind of click-throughs and not click-throughs that we're seeing, I know you've shared some data that you shared for the US a couple of years ago, I think, but you've also had for Europe, which shows basically the same thing, that the number of searches which don't result in a click at all are increasing, which we would all probably go with because we all do it and look for things online. So what are the kind of tactics that we can employ to kind of combat that and still have a relevant search experience?
Yeah, I think this is actually really hard. For some brands in some spaces, Google is such a strong competitor that their goal is, how do I put you out of business? How do I make it impossible for you to compete with me? Google in a lot of travel sectors is like that. I think I feel really badly for a bunch of people in that space who are trying to compete with Google in hotels or flights or vacations or even information about destinations, right? Google is basically just trying to take all those clicks from you and serve them up directly. If you want to compete in that space, I think you have to brand yourself around an idea that you have something Google cannot replicate. A good example of this is Airbnb, who basically said, oh yeah, Google, you'll have access to a hotel database, but you won't have access to our database. Like, we own that information. We're not going to share it with you. If you want a B&B through Airbnb, you're going to have to come to us. And through that, they've managed to have a lot of success. I think that, if I were Skyscanner or Expedia or Orbitz or any of these folks, I would be trying to build that same competitive advantage that Google can't access the same way, or some built-in feature, some set of technology, some underlying goal that you're serving from searchers that Google can't. Otherwise, pretty tough. That being said, those areas are still relatively few enough that there's a lot of places where publishers can compete. One of the tactics that you can certainly pursue is looking for words and phrases that still have high organic click-through rate. So some of the search engine optimization tool sets out there, Moz is one with Keyword Explorer, Ahrefs has this, I think SEMrush either has this or is going to have this soon, is an estimate of the click-through rate that a given keyword is suspected to send. And that is a very different metric to optimize against than volume. But if you want to be great at SEO, I think that's where you put your efforts. Same thing is true of long tail keywords, right? So going after the sort of 30 to 40% of terms and phrases that have fewer than 50 searches per month, that's probably a really good place to spend some effort. And that's a very different place than where we've done, especially content marketing in the past.
Which is much broader.
Which generally had broader targeting, but I think that's an area where Google won't be trying to compete as heavily.
And we had a talk actually at the International Search Summit yesterday all about featured snippets that Izzi Smith did, and one thing she was saying was kind of along the same lines, is don't go after the terms where it's a simple answer. Don't be there might be loads of, and that kind of correlates with there's probably a lot of volume, it's a big term, but actually if there's going to be an on-page answer that's what time is it where, or what time does such and such open, or I don't know any of these questions, or what date did this happen on, nobody needs to click through. Focus your effort on the things that actually can't be provided in just a few words, or, and that kind of links in with what you're saying, really, isn't it? Focus on what's going to make people click to get that further information. Or
yeah, I think there is a small amount of opportunity in some of those instant answers to also draw the click back. So something might, Google will offer these featured snippets or instant answers to questions where I think sometimes a marketer will know, hey, 10% of people or 20% of people won't be happy, won't be satisfied with just that. I think that by providing a snippet that is the answer plus a teaser for what else there is,
could be,
you can get some of those clicks. So I think that snippet writing and sort of almost ad copy plus answering is going to be an art and science for SEO of the future.
And that's it. It's a bit of art and science. It is a bit of take some idea of what might work, but then you're going to have to try it for yourself. You're going to have to play around with different kind of types of copy, with different kind of works, because there's no easy way to know what's going to work and what isn't.
Yeah. So it's way more complex than it used to be.
Yeah. That's the way it always goes, I guess. That's always how it works. And then just to touch on the influencer marketing that you also mentioned, because that is something that is one of the buzzy words of the year, and everyone's doing influencer marketing. But what exactly that means, or what, from a brand's perspective, going, right, I think we should try that, what that actually should look like. It's not really just, let's try and see if Kim Kardashian likes my bag.
Or
doesn't like it, but we'll post with it.
I think that there are certain sectors where what's currently called influencer marketing, essentially, how do I get half-naked people to pose with my product on Instagram or YouTube, which is a very odd practice in my view, but I think a very narrow one in terms of its marketing applications.
Yeah.
Look, if you're in specific areas of fashion or travel or health and beauty, some of these can be effective, right? They can drive direct sales sometimes because people who follow a few of these high-profile accounts will take action based on them, even if they're obviously an ad. And the new regulations in the EU, the UK, and the US have made it such that disclosure is mandatory, and it has to be much more visible than it was 2 years ago, for example. However, I think that in 90%, 95% of industries, it does not make sense to do just that. But influence, marketing through sources of customer influence is still a very, very good idea. It's just not influencer marketing. And so we have to think broader than this hyper-specific trend is going, moving away from the, hey, how do I get someone to post something sponsored on Instagram or YouTube, and moving to, what are the sources of influence that impact my customers? What do they listen to, read, watch, attend, visit, share? Who do they follow? What do they follow? All those kinds of questions. And then, how do we do marketing of all kinds in all of those places? Because it's not just Google and Facebook that dominate. There are, at least in the US, right? There's something close to a third of Americans listen to a podcast a week or more. Podcast is a huge opportunity. In B2B, tons of us go to events. Event marketing is a massive opportunity. PR still has incredible reach because in many industries and for many fields, there are certain publications that have tremendous amount of influence in those sectors. In others, it's forums and blogs still. So you have to find those. You can't just rely on, oh, look, we found someone with a bunch of followers on Instagram, we're going to have them post. I don't think that's the way.
No, definitely not. And then what about your own website? Because, you're talking there about, of course, kind of earlier on about you need to take some of your content off and just put them natively on platforms, where knowing that, obviously we can think about optimizing for snippets, but beyond that, what should a website look like now? When you're kind of building out your content and planning your site, where should you focus? What's most important to have there?
I am still a big believer in the website as being the center of everything. And I think that it is very, very dangerous to build up the social channels or any channel or platform that you don't own. Your Google Maps listing, your Facebook page, your Instagram page, your YouTube channels, whatever it might be. I think it's very dangerous to make those primary and your website secondary. I think it has to be the reverse. It's got to be website and email list first. Everything else serves those. And if you can do, good kinds of content for the social networks that will then help you serve what you need to on your site, great. But playing any other game, I think, is just dangerous. I know there's lots of folks especially like local SEO is a place where this happens all the time. I hear folks say, the website is dead, just optimize your Google Maps listing. I think that is, I understand why they say it, because it is true that your Google Maps listing is probably going to get 5-10 times more traffic than your actual website, because Google makes it so hard to find your website in local SERPs. But I disagree that should bias you against it. I think that the brands that succeed long-term, the local businesses that are going to have success long-term, I think they are going to build up their own brand, their own reason for people to give them their email address, not just a like on Facebook. They're going to give them a reason to visit their website, not just their Google Maps listing. I think you have to find a competitive advantage there, and that is your channels, not channels owned by somebody else.
And you do have people that will, find, it depends again what you're looking for, but, will look on a local search result, but still want to know more before they make, the decision to go to that place. So you might think, your top of Google Maps, you can get obviously a lot of information, what time's it open, what's this, but if you want really detailed look at who they are or what they offer, or maybe testimonials and all these things, you would maybe look further, and those are probably the customers that, if you can please on your website, are likely to buy much more than the ones that just want a quick answer.
I think that's absolutely true. And a website visit means that you can do retargeting and remarketing. And a website visit means that you know where your customers are coming from, and you know a little bit about them. And it means you have an opportunity to get a conversion to your email list. And then you can do a whole bunch of cool kinds of marketing. And if you can get that email marketing going in store, right, in your physical location, even better. So I think that, using Google Maps to get someone to your location is fine, and then you need to take the additional action of, now how do I get them to become part of my community?
And you mentioned email a couple of times, and that's something that I think has really seemed to go out of fashion in the past few years in terms of being talked about. It's almost like email, what was that? We did that 10 years ago, now it's all this other cool stuff. But actually, it's maybe more key than ever, because it's such a good way to talk to people who have already given you some indication that they actually care about what you're saying.
That's right, and there's so much you can do with an email, right? With an email address, you can reach out directly to a person. You can put that email into a bunch of social platforms and learn more about them. You can give it to data providers. You can give it to retargeting and remarketing. You can give it to Facebook and do advertising against that. So there's just so many options if you have an email address, and so few if all you have is, this person follows us on Instagram.
Yeah. And are people, in your experience, still quite open to giving emails? Because obviously that's another thing. People in general, the public, are more aware of privacy, are more aware of being bothered by companies, are more conscious of that. Do you think that has any impact or not really?
Yeah, probably. I think that probably means that it is more difficult, but much more valuable. Right?
Yeah.
So, whereas 10 email addresses maybe 10 years ago was valuable, but people got so much spam and there was so much skepticism. I think that as, I was asking on Twitter yesterday, I think, about, what's something that GDPR has done that's actually good for consumers that you can really point to. And someone said, I think it's actually reduced email spam and email clutter and made it such that people respond better to the emails that they actually subscribe to.
Yeah.
Great.
Which again is probably the case, because when anyone could send any email to anybody quite easily, you did just delete. And it is true, you do get fewer now. Yeah. Because companies got a bit scared and kind of scaled it back a lot, and that probably.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, I mean, I think a lot of the email providers do this great machine learning on top of spam reports. And so a lot of that never even reaches, a lot of the spam never even reaches people's inbox anymore. And so with a cleaner inbox, you get this higher rate of response.
And then you also mentioned retargeting, which is again nothing new and something that's seen as been seen as effective for quite some time. But do you think that is where a lot of the ad spend and the dollars in terms of advertising should be focused, opposed to kind of on more brand-based advertising or
Yeah, I think that if you can build up likability, trustworthiness, brand knowledge with an audience, and then market to them with paid, that is vastly superior than trying to do broad brand advertising. Just you'll pay less, you get more conversions, you'll generally have happier customers, and you will perform better with the platforms so that they will be more likely to show your ad in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And then something you've mentioned about recently, which isn't digital marketing related, but is world economy related, is the fact that you think recessions are potentially on the horizon for some, if not the whole world.
Yeah.
So by talking about that, why do we can't really prepare for that in some respects, or we don't know when that might happen or how it might happen, but what do you think that should, should that fit into thinking?
Yeah, so I think for marketers, I have been a marketer through, I guess, a pair of recessions, and what I saw very heavily in both of those is that suddenly people get much more metrics oriented. So they go from, throw dollars at brand advertising, throw dollars at, whatever sorts of things seem to be our competitors are doing them or they're hot right now, to what's the cost of acquisition and how does that compare to other channels. You also see a lot of folks pulling a lot of dollars pull back from pure growth mindedness to profitability mindedness. And so I think that is going to be actually, if recession happens, that will be a big opportunity for some brands to build their audiences, because the return on investment will actually start to appear there, because the dollars will flee from the sort of venture capital and growth equity, private equity, right? That'll all pull back. And so you'll see some space start to be there. The cool thing is, I think a recession is actually great opportunity for scrappy, smart, metrics-driven marketers, and a nightmare for sort of big brand, just throw dollars at the wall.
Yeah. So not all bad.
Not all. No. I think recessions can be really healthy, and cyclically speaking, we're in sort of either the longest or second longest boom period ever, at least the United States is. So it would be very odd
if at some point that doesn't.
I mean, I don't know whether it's 6 months away or 2 years away, but it's not 10 years away.
Yeah. And all of this in general could have a lot of kind of digital marketers and SEOs kind of panicking a bit and thinking, oh, right, this is all changing. What do we do? How do, this is all doom and gloom almost, but it isn't, and it doesn't have to be. How would you kind of switch the mindset? What would you say the mindset should be of a marketer in terms of the opportunity now in 2019 to, what should they be thinking in terms of how they can really grow their business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a few things are crucial. If you're a smaller business or you're serving smaller clients, I think that finding a few areas of core focus that work really well for you and doubling down on those, and finding ways to optimize and work around the competitive landscape and what all the platforms are doing will give you a great advantage. And if you're serving a larger brand, I think doing that across many different channels still has great opportunity for you. So anytime we discuss one of these big frustrating trends around whatever it is, recession, Google pulling a bunch of clicks from organic, Facebook reducing reach, influencer marketing being too narrowly defined and being seen as this trend that maybe is rife with fraud and fake accounts. I think there's also a corollary, which is there's opportunity inside each of those trends to find something that does work and get good at it, and then be able to show people, hey, here's the results.
Yeah, and I guess like with everything, if it was easy, everyone would do it, and
you don't want to do stuff that's easy, right?
Exactly.
Like you want to find stuff that's hard, because that gives you a competitive advantage, and that makes you look great to your boss, your team, your clients, your manager, etc.
Yeah. So focus on the opportunity, focus on the new things that are there available, and don't worry too much about how Google's changing things, because they're always going to change things. And
I mean, that changes what makes opportunity in this field.
Yeah, great. Well, that's a good note to end on. So thank you so much as always.
Yeah,
for
my
sharing all of
pleasure.
that.
Thanks for having me.